and welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And today I have the most wonderful Melanie Underwood with me, who I am going to hand over to introduce herself because, as I always say, my guests do a far better job of introducing themselves than I will ever do. So, Melanie, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Please do tell my listeners more about yourself, where you are, what you do, who you are, and let's chat away.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, so I'm Melanie Underwood, and I'm in New York. And I have been teaching culinary arts and baking and mindfulness for 28 years. And I have a business here. It's called Gather Culinary, where I really bridge the gap between food and mindfulness. And it's really beautiful because, as you know, those two things go hand in hand. You know, cooking couldn't be anything more than bringing you in the present moment. So it's so nice. And cooking is something that most people do every day. And it's a great opportunity for people to use this task that they're doing and saying, I'm going to use it to help myself and use all of my senses. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, and I mean, food, it's wonderful. I mean, I love food and I actually really enjoy cooking. When I left home, my parents were both good at cooking, so I didn't really do much cooking at home. And then I had to sort of teach myself. But it's great, isn't it, when you actually create food from ingredients and you trust yourself and you go with it, or whether you're doing recipes or not, you can just work with it. And you, as you said, it's very mindful, very meditative when you are in the kitchen and you're enjoying the process. And even more so when you're cooking with your ingredients that you've grown at home, which unfortunately, I think society has lost so much of that with the fast food generation. So I'm curious, Manny, what drove you into this in the very first instance? And how did it all start? How did you get inspired to work with food and cook food and teach food and do food and mindfulness? How did it all come about?
Well, I grew up on a farm, and I think, seeing everything that, for instance, we didn't eat rice. I didn't eat rice until I was a teenager because we didn't grow rice. So we really only ate things that we grew. And we had a lot of animals. We had cows and pigs, turkeys, ducks. I could go on. We had 27 peacocks. Peacocks are like my spirit animal. And I really believe it's because I was with them all the time. So I had just a very inherent appreciation of not only food, but growing food and the amount of energy that it takes from a human to make it happen, but also from nature.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was very mystical, which I don't think I knew at the time. And he was so connected to the moon and the sun and earth. And I have goosebumps right now because I didn't understand that when I was a kid. And I really only really started to understand that in my late 20s and early 30s and how that connected to me. But that was like my first introduction to food, was just growing it and having this major appreciation for it. But also we gathered around a table, and that was the most impactful thing to me, was how food brings people together.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my home, my parents always argued. They were like both super opinionated, very bright. I remember once my parents got into this huge argument over the word pungent. But when we sat down at the dinner table, the arguing stopped. And there was this subconscious training that being at a table around food brought calm and peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely didn't realize that until I started my own company. And I was thinking, what am I going to call my company? What is my name going to be? And I was thinking, because to me, words are so important. They're just so symbolic. And so for me, my husband, he was like, oh my God, you are taking forever. And I said, yes, because this is a representation of me and who I am. And I really need it to be spot on. And I thought, gather. That's what we did. We gathered at tables. We gathered around milking stalls. Gathering brought us together. And so that was really my first introduction as a kid, was all of that. And then when I was in college, I really hated what I was doing. I was pre-law and journalism, and the pre-law side I did not like. I was working on Capitol Hill, and I was also only 17, but I saw things that were happening that were not sort of copacetic in my belief system. And I said to my parents, I just don't want to do this I can't live like this forever. I can't imagine this. So my mom said, do what you love. And I said, well, the only thing I really love is baking.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
she was like, I guess you need to be a baker then. And so I sort of set out then on like, how am I going to make this happen? Because my father was said, I'm not paying for you to go to culinary school, because he really wanted me to finish college and have a little bit more traditional trajectory. And he also did not want me becoming a cook, because in Virginia in 1988, if you were a cook, you were more, it wasn't something glamorous. It wasn't, sort of meeting my dad's expectations of what he thought. But anyway, I persevered. I got a job at a hotel that was opening. I tell a story that they said no, because they said you don't have any experience. But I said I have more experience than probably most people who've gone to culinary school, because I did grow up butchering animals. I grew up growing food. So I have a lot of experience. And I actually said, why don't you just hire me? Give me a month. You don't even need to pay me. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Just give me
Oh,
the opportunity.
love your
And
style there.
obviously
Love your
it worked
style
out.
there.
Well, I always know when I show up, to be honest, it's going to work out, because I do
Excellent.
have a really strong work ethic. And then the girl that I worked with, who was the pastry chef there, she's 2 or 3 years later, she said, I'm going to apply for this job in New York. The Four Seasons Hotel is opening. I'd love for you to apply. And I did, and they hired me. So that was, once I opened the Four Seasons Hotel in New York, it was sort of like I never needed to look back, because that's a pretty strong thing to have on your resume, especially at such a young
Wow.
age. And then
Wow.
I continued, working in hotels and restaurants. And then I had an appendectomy unexpectedly. So I said to a friend who taught in a cooking school, do you think I could just work in the office for 2 months there until I can go back to working at restaurants and hotels? And when I went there, the owner said, have you ever thought of teaching? And I said, no, it sounds terrible. I am so aggressive. You don't want a teacher to be aggressive. You need your teacher to be like supportive and kind and loving. And he said, just sit on in some classes and see what you think. And honestly, it was so amazing. And it's definitely my gift. And I know that about myself, that I'm really meant to be a teacher, and that's all I'm meant to be. And I
Wow.
can't even imagine what, if that turn hadn't happened, where my life would be, because for me, it opened up my world. It made me start using a different side of my brain and my personality. But also, I hear from students every day, even now, like, you changed my life.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love the fact that you've always had this sort of mindset, and you've kind of really been following your flow. You've kind of listened and you've tuned in. But like you said about the appendectomy, that I didn't know I could say that word. I mean, first time I ever said it. That you used that opportunity to do what you did, and how that's, completely transformed what you were doing and helped you connect with discovering your what you're meant to be, what you're meant to do. And this is the exciting thing: when you do connect, you listen to your intuition, and you reach out and you trust and you go for it. Things like this happen. But if you don't do it, as they say, if you keep doing the same thing, you keep on getting the same results. But sometimes you're pushed into a position of doing something completely different, and that's when it sort of unfolds and the magic happens. So what I'd love to know, though, is what was it your father right at the beginning that sort of wanted to encourage you to go down the sort of the legal journalism route? Because that's quite interesting, from the farm to that bit, before you then obviously went, no, this isn't for me. Let me go down the route I want to go.
Well, my mother was an engineer and my dad was an entrepreneur. So
Right.
we weren't farming for money. And it was really my granddad's farm. And my grandfather had worked for the government. But my granddad grew up during the Depression. And one thing that I think, and he was young, and his parents died when he was young, but he had 11 brothers and sisters. And I know what stuck with him was that they were never short of food, because they had a farm.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that stuck with him. And that was so significant in his ability to survive, that was something he wanted to carry forth. And I remember as a kid, my granddad was, and also he was alive during the Depression. He was frugal. and he would save things. Like I remember him saving like twine that came off of a hay bale.
Hmm.
But he was like, Melanie, these things you can use, you're repurposing. And he was so ahead of his time. And I just feel like, so no, the expectation was never like, I'm going to go into farming. Although there was a point where I said like, maybe I could be like a farmer. And my dad was like, no, you're going to have terrible hours and you're going to make no money. And both of my parents and my grandparents always encouraged me to follow my intuition.
Brilliant.
And we know, because people ask me this all the time, like, how do you follow your intuition? My parents and my grandparents led by example, but they also just literally said, trust yourself. And so I remember my dad and I having a conversation where I said to him, this is backfiring on you because you told me to trust myself. So I don't care what you're saying. I'm going to trust myself and do what I need to do.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And it's so important to trust your gut instinct and just go with it. And like you're saying, it's people ask, how do you do it? But it's getting to know yourself, exploring, understanding what fires you, what excites you, what thrills you, and rather than doing what other people say that you should be doing, and this is what you ought to be doing, trust yourself and listen to yourself. And it was interesting what you said about your parents. And I remember my dad, this is not career wise at all or anything like that, but it's post divorce. You've got to take your own counsel. Look, deal with what cards are in your hand at any one time. I'm not just, you've got to take your own counsel on this, and it's empowering, it's powerful stuff. And I think in society as a whole, so many people are listening to that noise of you've got to do this, you've got to do this to be successful, you must do this, and it's eradicating any trust or belief in the self with all the stuff that's coming out in magazines, on the television, on the radio, social media. It's just like, you've got to be this, you've got to be you. And you are unique. You're your own unique individual, human being. We're meant to all come together. We're all one part of the same whole anyway. But we've got all our differences so that we can collaborate and we can bring forth our own uniqueness and magic and talents for teaching in your case.
Yes, but Sarah, I don't think people do that. And I can say that pretty comfortably because I also, I teach in a high school part-time.
Hmm.
So I work with teenagers.
Yeah.
And if you're a parent and you're listening, I would really encourage you to help your kids drown out the noise because parents don't usually do that.
Hmm.
I obviously am a parent that does that. And my older son, he definitely sort of went against the system. And, he went to a college prep school here in New York. He didn't go to college. He was like, this isn't for me. I want to do hands-on work. And I'm okay with that.
Hmm.
But our friends at the time in his school were like, how can you let him do that? And I said, he's his own person. He
Yeah.
will do what he wants to do. And you know what? He's allowed to then change his mind. He's allowed to go back to school at any point in time and say, you know what? I want to go to college. And I
Exactly.
really think, as you said, people get so hung up on, hey, I have to do this and I have to do that. My kids need to do this. They need to do this. They actually need to do what they want to do. We are just little parents guidelining. I feel like I'm like a river or maybe even a creek, and my kid is a fish.
Hmm.
And I'm giving him some boundaries.
Hmm.
And I'm like, here's, these are the boundaries, but you swim where you need to go.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think we're so much on the same page with this, Mel. We really are, because although I've got my difficulties with my son, which are a sort of a side of that, I've always supported him, helped him, encouraged him to follow his flow, to do his thing, to be his own person. A little bit backfired on me as well, because that, how, especially as I've, anyway, we won't talk about the ins and outs of my son's relationship as it is right now. However, as I've said, I've always done that. And that's part of me, because having spent 36 years in recruitment and supported other people and met with people who've gone down the education thing. Well, I've done that now. I've ticked that box to satisfy my parents. Kind of like, I now want to do what I want to do. And that's so wrong. I mean, yes, okay, there may be learning from what you've done because you've done what your parents want you to do. However, like you said, if parents are listening, encourage your children or the children in your care to follow their flow. Listen to what fires them up, because will always be, and I steadfastly agree with this, it's my thing, which is why I wrote a book on it. It's like there will always be a career associated with something that you're passionate about. You might not
Yeah.
even need to know what it is yet, but it's those elements. What is it that you enjoy doing? What is it that your children enjoy doing? Whatever it is, let them follow their flow, because if, it might be that they're interested in football and mathematics. Well, they could end up being an accountant in a football firm. You
Yes.
know, it's it doesn't mean to say that they're going to be the next international footballer, because they might not have that talent, but if they've got an interest, the passion generates itself. My son's interest was in fashion, in skateboarding. He's got his own skate clothing brand. He's works for my ex-husband. He's got hands-on plastering tools and hands-on joinery skills and things like that, because they make garden rooms together. But I've always encouraged him to follow his flow. I mean, during lockdown, he was ordering stuff from Spain and Germany and China to come in. He taught himself. He was self-taught, because if you're doing something you're interested in, you naturally want to learn. And that will send me
Absolutely.
off onto something about the education system, but we won't get onto that just now.
I agree. But it's also, again, teaching your kids to trust themselves
Mhm,
and not second guessing them. And I think we have a generation of adults who lived in a space of second guessing. And I really believe that's a huge disconnect from nature.
mhm,
We're disconnected from sort of the natural rhythms. And so I think we're not trusting ourselves because we don't have a connection. We're not connected to each other. We're not connected to nature. There's just a lot of disconnection. And when
mhm.
we have that, we're like, wait, what? And you can't sort of find your own flow.
No. No, and I think, that word disconnect is a real powerful one, and I do think there's a lot more than we don't know about this sort of disconnect, that everybody's being forced down this tunnel to disconnect to be controlled, I believe. And you've got to reconnect. We've got to let go of and not listen to all of this stuff. And it comes back round to you and your granddad and the food and the farm and the understanding the natural rhythms of nature and the moon cycles and things like this. Because when you mentioned the moon, I was going to pull back into that, because I remember my ex-sister-in-law, she had this incredible book at one point and she lent it to somebody, never saw it again, but she gave me some times in conjunction with the moon and whatever it was all to do with the planetary alignments. And I sowed these herbs from seed. They were the biggest herbs I have ever seen. They were huge. The soil was good. It was a south facing garden, yes, but it was all to do with the planting in conjunction with the cycle
Yes.
of the moon and the planets. And once we've lost that, because we've been pushed down this fun. I mean, yes, the tech's great. I'm in the UK, you're in the States, we're able to do it's brilliant. And we can record it. It's fantastic. But what has it dulled down in? We've lost that connection of telepathy, whereas we've all got it. We've all got
Yes.
that ability to sort of tune into each other when you allow yourself to just breathe, which again comes into the mindfulness, being mindful, being aware, looking at being aware of the food that you're preparing and what you're eating. Because what we put into our body is what we get out.
Yeah. It's also, I think it's like you said, people are away from those rhythms and aren't sure how to get back to them. And I think
Mhm,
because there is so much noise, and I obviously I don't know how it is in the UK, but I definitely know in New York, people are so competitive and they're like, my kid needs to be number one. I need to be number one. Where I am I do this myself all the time. I silence people
mhm,
and I don't want to hear that. And I always encourage people to do the same. I encourage kids to do it. I'm like, don't listen to other people. I tell my husband,
mhm.
he's a big proponent of trying to tell me what to do. And I'm like, buddy, don't tell me what to do. As soon as somebody starts telling me what to do, I put a mode around myself, like a literal physical and mental sort of shield, because I know better than anybody. And I think everybody does. It's just, I trust myself enough to allow myself to know that.
Absolutely. And it's working with the quantum, it's working with that energy. There's so much more in the unseen than there is in the seen. And when you trust that, when you believe in it and everything's got to working out. I mean, I went through a real time of it last year, as I know, I'm sure you're aware of some of it, but everything sort of crashed around me. And in the end, even though I'd always held the belief everything's working out wonderfully, even that was challenged last year, because I'm going, how can it be? All of this is just like, oh my God, what's going on? And when I just let go and surrendered, everything then just fell into place, because you're not trying to control the outcome. You're allowing the flow of energy, and you're allowing things to sort of happen. And so it's that mindset that I have in life. There's things that, yes, I'd like to be successful at. There's things I'd love to be doing. I love presenting. I love being on the radio. I love being on the TV. I love doing all of that. I trust that it will happen at some point, but I don't really know how it's all going to evolve. And I've just have to get out of my own way sometimes and just go, because I'm aware of it. I know what I need to do, but you can suddenly catch up with yourself within, you know, former patterns of behavior going, well, I need to do this. I need to do. No, you don't. You just need to know where you want to be, to recognize the opportunities that are presenting themselves, and then sort of go in with that natural flow of things, but speak your truth, because what, as you've just said, what is good for you. We've met through our joy of actually presenting through Insight Timer, which is amazing.
That is amazing. I do love that about Insight Timer. It's like you said about tech. I go on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. for mindful cooking or intuitive baking. And I literally have people from all over the world, which I would never have without Insight Timer. I've been on other platforms who don't have that reach. And it's nice, but it's really amazing what Insight Timer is bringing to the world.
Yeah, because you could interact, and that's the beauty of it. You could have that sort of interaction through the chat. Obviously, at the time of recording this, I'm having a few issues about hosting my lives, but yeah, absolutely. I've had people on from South Africa, from India, from Europe, from the States, and it's just great because you are connecting with people, but you are actually able to do that. And it's not like you've got a Zoom screen with all these little faces. It's because you've only got the chat box, haven't you? Which is amazing. So you're not sort of, we're talking about noise. You've not got the noise of different people putting their hands up, but you can just observe the chat, which is quite easy to do whilst you're doing your lives. I don't know how you do your cooking though, by the way. How do you cook and do a live and keep an eye on the chat?
I want to say something going back to what you said about the chat. There's always a part of me who's like, I wish I could see you, but I actually came to realize, and I do wish I could see people because it would be lovely. But I'm also not very judgmental of people, so that's helpful. But I think in general, people are judgy. But when we can't see each other, that judgment is gone. We don't see what people look like, what they're wearing. And so with that sort of judgment pops out. And I think actually the chat is like this amazing equalizer, because all it is words. We see nothing about a person. We know nothing about them. And I love that. And this is a question I get all the time, actually. And this came up yesterday on my live about how do you answer the chat? Someone was like, I've been in so many lives and I cannot believe that you're working with fire and knives and keeping up with the chat. And I think it's from teaching for so long.
Yeah.
That I've done demos for up to 5,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you have to really, and for me, my husband actually is like, you're tuning into people too much, but that's why I'm successful as a teacher, because I'm tuning into people.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happens for me in the chat. And there was a day I remember, like, I was so off and I was like, I'm just going to let the chat go. And I said to people, it's flying by. I cannot keep up with it. Repost it if you need it answered. But in general, I have my computer in front of me and I have my phone here. So I have two devices that I can always sort of look at. And I tell people, if I don't answer it, just write it again. But I am really good at keeping up with the chat. And also because when I'm chopping, I don't need to look.
Oh my gosh. Well, I had fingernail the other day and that was looking.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, I don't encourage other people to do that. It's been because I've been cooking for so long and I have good knife skills.
And you have fingers.
That's right. I still live to tell about it.
Okay. Brilliant. Oh, yeah, so, I mean, it is, it's great. Hosting the lives is brilliant, and then you're coming back round to the mindfulness as well. You are in tune then with what you are preparing, and that energy. Actually, when you are in tune with what you're cooking and you have a passion for creating the food, you're putting that energy into the food, and that is feeding that food in itself, that then when you eat it, you're getting that energy, because it's all to do with energy transference at the end of the day, which is why all this processed food, in addition to the actual process it goes through, it has no good energy in it, does it? Because it's been mass produced.
Yeah, it's depleting a lot of energy, and the soil in it for many places has no nutrients. It's so complex, the whole system. But
Hmm.
yes, and I actually have I don't know if you even know this, a mindful cooking book club on Insight Timer.
Oh,
And
wow.
we read a book about synesthesia, which is essentially what you're talking about, is like feeling energy through
Hmm.
different mediums. And in the book we read, it was about a woman who would feel the energy of food. And so she would feel it whether someone prepared it or even a farmer.
Hmm.
She talked, it was a fiction book, but people do experience this. And she could sense if someone had been, going through a traumatic breakup, or she could feel this when she would eat the food. And I, I don't have that deep of a connection where I'm feeling other people's feelings, but I think what you said about the energy into the food, it starts with the soil,
Hmm.
and it just continues. I am certified, like I have master composting certification, and when I had to apply for this program, it was sponsored by New York City Department of Sanitation. I wrote an essay on how composting is really the cycle of life,
Hmm.
and the decomposition and the soil. Like, we need to make sure the soil is fertile for our food to have nutrients.
Yeah.
And it's hard with mass farming. I also am completely aware that some people don't have the financial means
Hmm.
to buy higher quality food, which to me should not even exist. Because again, here in New York, if you're buying food at the farmer's market from small farms, it's definitely more costly,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So not everybody has that opportunity, which always I find very disappointing,
Hmm.
you
But don't
know.
you think it's down to sort of education again? I mean, I ought to buy more organic. I know myself, but there is a time when you start to you find yourself putting yourself under this huge amount of pressure of trying to shop around to get the products that you actually want, like no plastics,
Yeah.
and then you're spending more time in the car, so your carbon
Yes,
footprint.
exactly. You have
um,
nailed it. And people then they're like, I'm giving up. I can't be successful because no matter what I do, and people are, and I, this is what I talk about this on Insight
mm,
Timer. You must do what works for you, because
exactly.
there's never going to be the perfect solution for anything. You know, my older son, who's very conscientious about waste,
Hmm.
he definitely gives me crap about my use of paper towels.
Hmm.
And I said to him, that's kind of my thing. I use paper towels probably more than the average person, just because of having a school.
Hmm.
And I use cloths too, but sometimes paper towels really are only what's doing the job. And I think it's a balance. I'm
Yeah.
always trying to be cognizant in other areas. So I always tell people, don't put pressure on yourself for this perfection. You're only doing the best that you can. And as I really believe, when we have good intentions, we're going to have good outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. But equally so, I was talking to, not equally so, but I was talking to a guy who's at our local recycling centre, just one of the operatives there. Oh, we go so often, we're on first name terms. Hi, Dan. But we're having a conversation with him. There's a really nice deli near us, at a place called Norfolk Lavender. So if you want to have a look at it, anybody, it's very lovely. They actually grow. They've got fields full of purple lavender that they grow, which is amazing. It looks incredible, which they harvest, and they make all the oils and things like that. But they've got a
Mhm.
deli there as well. And he said, he was telling people that that's where he buys his produce from. They've got a butcher's there, they've got a deli, they've got all this lovely produce. And people were saying to him, well, you must be earning a lot of money, because bearing in mind, he's an operative at a recycling centre. And he said he'd rather go there and spend less money on quality goods than going into the likes of Lidl and buying a whole pile of rubbish that he doesn't need. And that's the problem, isn't it? With all the point of sale and all these supermarkets with all your big sort of your middle aisle. I mean, we joke about it, the middle aisle. But that's the problem. You go in and you buy stuff that you didn't know you need because it's been strategically placed to encourage you to buy it because you think you're getting a bargain or this or that or the other. But we shopped at both yesterday. We bought some product. We went and got some milk, and then we went and got some burgers and some sausages from the deli. And I said, I wish we'd have bought the chicken from here rather than at Lidl. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but it wasn't probably as well bred as it could have been. And actually, I prefer to eat less meat than more meat anyway. But it's just being mindful because I then cooked up all the green beans out the garden, which was nice.
That is nice. Yeah. And it is a balance. And I mean, for me, I typically don't go in the middle aisles because there's nothing there that it's going to, like you said, it's going to tempt me, So I'm like, I don't need to be there. I just go on the periphery, and we have people here that can shop for you. And sometimes because I really teach so much, I'll use that service. And I actually find that in many ways helpful because then there's no temptation. I'm ordering what I need online.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't see anything. But they're also, I don't know, obviously I can't speak to the UK, but there is something here called Misfits Market. And there's other variations of it, but I have used Misfits Market. It is an amazing organization. They take produce that maybe wouldn't have been used because it has a blemish, and they are selling it. And it is, I used it during the pandemic quite a bit. And I compared the cost of that to Whole Foods and to another place here called Fresh Direct. And it was 40% cheaper.
Wow.
For the same product. Because I do buy the certain products. And I will never forget once cherry tomatoes were like $6.99 at Whole Foods. And they were essentially $2.99 at Misfits Market. And it's the same brands. And they weren't really that blemished. And so it is a great way to save money. It is, I can't speak highly enough of it.
Yeah. Well, what I don't understand is this whole change. I mean, I remember growing up and going down to the greengrocers, and you would just go and get, I mean, cucumbers, zucchinis. They don't grow straight. Not in the normal world. Everything was sort of, you used to get your carrots that got all sort of funny bits. I don't care. Just grow it and sell it. Does it really matter that it's not fitted through a machine? You've got the weight. The weight's fine. I used to weigh out when I worked on my first jobs. I'd be out there with a sack of potatoes. I'd been weighing the potatoes out, and everything was loose. And we've created this society with packaging, and everything's got to be conformed to a certain shape. Why?
Believe it or not, I really believe this ties into humanity because we want a certain aesthetic. And I think that if we would be more accepting, and people on Insight Timer are like, wow, I didn't make that connection. I really believe if we would be open to things not looking perfect, that carries over to having an acceptance of imperfection and accepting that I'm Melanie. This is me. This is what I bring to the table. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. That's my carrot. It's got a weird knob on it. It still tastes like a carrot. It's still a carrot.
Oh, we are so much on the same page. Acceptance is something that I really sort of, when I'm working with people, anybody that comes into my orbit, it's just like, accept yourself, accept everybody who they are. I don't want to look like Barbie, and if you've got issues along those lines, it's about doing the inner work. It's not about carving your body up on the outside and all of these. We're getting down onto my soapbox now. All of this, the surgeons that are allowed and keep on carving people's faces up to make them into a caricature, they should be struck off. The people who are coming to them, they should be referred to for sort of other health reasons, because once we accept ourselves from within, you don't need to go and carve yourself up. You really, really, truly don't.
Yeah, this is a hot button that I always get pinned on every time because I have said I don't get Botox. And my friend is like, you don't have a lot of wrinkles for 54. And so you are in a different space. And she's like, but I promise you, if you had more wrinkles, you would want Botox. And I'm not sure that I would because it's not my thing. But I will say that every time I step into this territory, I get nailed because people are like, well, if you're all about acceptance, why can't you accept people getting work done? And I can, but I say, why do we need to do work? We are going to grow old, all of us.
Yeah.
And why can't we do that with some grace and acceptance of the way that we look? And why do, if that's the case, why do more women get plastic surgery than men?
Mm-hmm.
And we accept men looking a certain way when they're older, and in fact, many people are like, oh wow, he's, a handsome older gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
versus look at that beautiful older woman. I'm not doing it from a place of like, oh, I think you're wrong. I'm doing it from a place of, I wish you'd love yourself.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. 100%. And it comes back down to what we were talking about before. It's all that noise. It is the marketing machine. And right now, it's all about cutting yourselves up to look like a certain way. But what's going to happen when suddenly that all changes and you need to look completely
A
different and
different
you
way.
a different way? Because who is it that's dictating this? And comes on to something we've discussed in the past as well about what you should be wearing and shouldn't be wearing. Who's should? No. Wear what you want to wear. Wear what makes you feel good. I will wear certain clothes one day and other clothes, as you know, another day. I love latex, and I also love wearing no makeup at all and just have it looking like a right scruffy old whatever. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you feel at any given time. And it's like, yes, I love cooking food, and I cooked a really nice meal the other night, and other times it might just be egg on toast. It doesn't matter. We haven't got to create some sort of amazing spread every meal, but I do like to think that I create from scratch. Did porridge this morning. I'm not quite sure what we're doing for lunch, but we'll be doing it very shortly, and I'm going to be cooking a curry up with the chicken leftovers later. But it's gosh. Oh, Melanie, we could talk. We could talk for hours. I think we said this on our first meeting.
It's true.
Goodness me. So how do people get in touch with you? I mean, obviously we're of the same mindset, but you do your thing and I do my thing. Mine's very much about, well, it used to be about careers, but mine's all sort of changing and more about coaching these days. But you're obviously there with your
Cooking
culinary
school.
teaching on Insight
Yes.
Timer and in person and all the things that you do. So how can people find you? How can they connect with you? Where can they get in touch with you?
Well, my website is gatherculinary.com, and they can always connect with me through that, but they can find me on Insight Timer, Melanie Underwood, and also, on social media, Instagram, it's Chef Melanie Underwood. So either all three of those platforms I'm fairly active on, and I check my messages. So my website has my email, and always happy to answer questions. But I do in-person classes, and I do virtual classes for people who are like, hey, I need some help, but I'm in London and I can't make it to your cooking school. I actually have somebody who is in London who takes cooking classes with me.
Oh,
Online.
wow.
So it's
Oh,
very
that's
nice. Yeah.
amazing. I'm going to have to quickly, before we finish, ask you how that works. So what are you teaching generally? I mean, when you're teaching online or teaching one-to-one, what are you actually specifically teaching? Could it be anything?
It could be anything. I have a private class today where this person, it's a man, and he said, I don't help my wife enough in the kitchen.
Mm.
And I have kids, and she does everything. And I really need to step up and help her. So I want to learn healthy basics. So in a private class, somebody's getting, they're getting customized whatever they want. But like I have an adult class coming up. It's called All About Mushrooms. So it's just learning to use different mushrooms.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's fun. And so the virtual stuff is only private. It's not, I don't have virtual group classes, and when someone does a private class, it can really be whatever their goal is. And I spend a lot of time asking people, what are your goals? Why, because somebody who's taking, I'm sorry, somebody who's taking a private class usually has a goal in mind. And honestly, some people don't care about mindful cooking, and they're like, I don't want to know any of that, but it sort of happens inherently because what happens is people will say to me, oh, how did you know that was done? And that's where the mindful cooking piece comes in. Whether people want it or not, it's paying attention and using visual cues, listening. I get asked this question on Insight Timer all the time, because I'll be like, oh, I'm going to check the oven, or I've got maybe a mixer on, and I'm like, it's ready. And it's because I'm listening. You know, I get asked this all the time. Do you listen to music when you cook? And I actually don't, because I think in kitchens, I never listen to music, but also because it's become such a huge part of my ability to teach. So I'm like, oh, the mixer changed in the sound. So I know that the butter and sugar is whipped enough, or I know the cream is ready. And so I'm listening to that. And it's the same thing in classes. Even when people are like, no, I don't want to know that part, I'm like, okay, but look, you have to look at your food, you have to taste your food. This is mindful cooking. You're doing it whether you want to or not, because you're just paying attention to those
Yes.
natural cues of cooking.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing quite like the onions going all crispy.
Yes, and that sizzle.
My mum taught me to put in some brown sugar into the onions, and that makes them caramelize. Oh, very nice. Oh dear, I'm salivating now, Melanie. I'm salivating. But I mean, as I said, I could talk to you for forever. But thank you. I'm going to wrap this up now, because obviously it will end up being a very, very long video interview. But thank you so much for giving some insight using a pun, insight into your world, into your mindful cookery, your teaching, and all the things that we've obviously got joint passions about. So if you want to get in touch with Melanie, you know where to find her. She's already told you that she's on the internet and she's on Insight Time, and you can find her anywhere. And if you want to contact me, I'm at sarahjnaylor.com or on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Insight Timer as well as sarahjnaylor.com. No, I'm not. Just a Sarah Naylor. I don't know. Thank you again, Melanie. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much.